Planar magnetic. What pops into your mind when you hear those words? You probably think of Hi-Fi Man and Audeze. Other companies make planar headphones, but only these behemoths have the marketing power to constantly shove their products in our faces. Hi-Fi Man does not make headphones for mixing and mastering for professional work. Part of the reason is because Hi-Fi Man is simply inconsistent in build and sound quality. But then there's Audeze. These guys cater primarily to the typical audiophile rather than professionals. Audeze makes good products, except for the Mobius, that all have a similar sound signature. Unlike Hi-Fi Man, Audeze does claim to make professional headphones. Their current lineup of so-called professional headphones includes the LCD-1, MX4, LCD-X, and LCD-XC. Take a look at their prices and tell me what kind of a professional is using $3,000 headphones in the mixing booth. My experience with planar headphones has left me thinking there is no such thing as a true reference quality, neutral, planar magnetic headphone. Not because it is impossible, but because nobody really wants to do it. Then Avantone came along and released their planar headphones just this month. They call it Planar. And depending on the color you choose, you can buy either the planar black or planar red. These people obviously lack imagination for naming, but is it possible that this company can do what others before it could not? Avantone is a staple among professionals. These guys make microphones mostly and had one professional dynamic driver headphone called the MP1. Avantone is based in the United States. It started in California, then moved its headquarters to New York. If you review the Avantone website, you will notice a lot of products that are competitively priced. They aren't cheap per se, but they also are not typical prices for professional gear. Avantone has an ethos about pricing. I'll just read what they say. Quote, "There has been a disturbing and annoying trend in the music business over the years that we will not participate in. Some manufacturers release list prices on their products that are ridiculously high, then leave it to their dealers to get as much as they can from customers in the form of varying discounts based on the relationship or buying power of the customer. We think that is frustrating to the end users. We establish a fair price that anyone can buy for, whether they are a rock star millionaire or a customer buying his first really nice mic. Our products are already pre-discounted to a pro deal level." End quote. Well, that's good to know. But just because a product is reasonably priced does not mean it's a good product. The short version is that Avantone has been around since 2006, have been making audio gear consistently with consistently good reviews by professionals. As I said, the Planar is Avantone's second headphone. The first was the MP1, and to be honest, the MP1 looks ghoulishly ugly but was designed for recording use. They were to provide flat response and a selectable bass presentation. I have never heard the MP1 and cannot comment about that. What I can say is that it is very difficult to find meaningful reviews about that headphone. Those who have reviewed the MP1 seem to agree it is a useful professional tool. The Planar has a similar goal. Avantone says that the Planar was designed for mix engineers, musicians, podcasters, live streamers, and hi-fi enthusiasts. Avantone says that the Planar is tuned for a flat response. Avantone does not make any other specific claims, but they mention that Planar drivers provide, quote, amazing accuracy, high-end detail, clarity, natural bass, and response time. Some less than stellar review sites took this general statement from Avantone's website and claimed these words apply specifically to the Planar. That's not accurate. I found no marketing material or statements on the website which directly explain what the Planar should sound like. Consequently, the only unambiguous promise that Avantone is making is that the Planar is flat sounding. I take this to mean that the headphones are neutral. As a side note, I want to point out the different cables in the box. Avantone includes a single 3.5mm cable as well as a dual 3.5mm cable. The Planar's wiring is interesting. You can use the single 3.5mm cable and plug it into either ear cup, or you can choose to use the dual 3.5mm cable, plug either end into either ear cup, and just as well be happy. There is no audible difference between these cables. I asked Avantone if there is anything special about the wiring and if balance cables can be used. I was told there was nothing of note to worry about and balance cables can be used. However, Avantone said we should be careful about the amplifier since some amp manufacturers might have weird wiring that might not be compatible. Generally, Avantone says that the Planar can be plugged into a balanced source with a balanced cable and an unbalanced source using an unbalanced cable. They also confirmed you can use a balanced to unbalanced adapter with the stock cables if you so choose. But again, do it with caution. The Planar is a big headphone. It is heavy in the hand and quite unique in style. The ear cup grills are metal with very large hexagonal cutouts. The driver housing, yoke, and headband are all metal. They feel like aluminum. If there is any plastic on this headphone, I simply can't find it. A fairly non-standard feature of the Planar is its ear pads. These are rectangular and measure approximately 4.5 inches tall by 3 inches wide. The ear openings are about 2.5 inches tall and 1.5 inches wide. The ear pads are velour-type material. Moreover, the ear pads are stuck to the ear cups using Velcro. Taking the pads and putting them back on is simple and quick. If you find other ear pads, you can simply slap a few pieces of Velcro to them and they will stick. All of this makes sense because the driver size in the Planar is 70mm by 95mm. For comparison, the LCD-X's transducer size is 106mm. The actual dimensions are not published. And the LCD-1's transducer size is 90mm. Again, actual dimensions are not available. The other interesting feature of this headphone is the cable. The Planar comes with two cables, as I said previously. The cables are covered in a Kevlar-like material. This gives the cables significant strength, rigidity, and durability. However, the Kevlar also creates harmonics into the cable if you rub the cable onto something. The headband is not padded, but it is self-adjusting. At first, the Planar looks and feels much too big and cumbersome. However, it sits very easily on my head. My ears are fully enclosed inside the ear pads. The ear pads are plush and soft, and give a similar feeling to the stock ear pads on the DT880. Even though the headband is not padded, the weight is very easily distributed. I feel no pressure points or hot spots. I found that the Planar is more comfortable than the Audeze LCD2 and the LCD-X. The even distribution of weight and soft ear pads contribute to the overall comfort. Consequently, comfort, I think, is excellent. Build quality is also superb. The headphones do not squeak or feel shaky. The Planar is an interesting headphone. It's easy to drive. It is 32 ohms with an SPL of 104 decibels. Using portable amplifiers should not be a problem. But Avantone has a minimum and recommended power requirement. That's a specification which is not often shown. Usually, a company will tell you the power handling capacity, but not the recommended power for peak performance. Avantone says that the Planar needs at least 100 milliwatts to function properly, but it needs more than 250 milliwatts to perform at its best. I decided to test the Planar on the RME ADI2 DAC, the KN iDAC 6 Mark II connected to the Audio GD1 amp, and the Earman TR amp. The iDAC has a tube that can be turned on for a slight tube effect. I played with that intermittently to determine if the Planar picked up the nuanced changes. Frankly, I could not tell much difference between the solid state and tube effect on the iDAC and Planar pairing, but that's a pretty standard experience. I played songs from Amazon Music HD and my FLAC library. I used the stock cables. Bass on the Planar is accurate, neutral, and quite clear. There is a sense of resolution to the bass that is often missing in other headphones, whether they are planar magnetic or some type of dynamic drivers. In Mountains by Hans Zimmer, there is a sub-bass rumble that starts from the beginning and lingers throughout the song. Sometimes it is prevalent, sometimes it is in the background. The Planar was able to recreate the sub-bass rumble. It was not accentuated. The sub-bass had a very quick transience, some of the fastest I have heard on any headphone. An interesting aspect I had not really noticed before is the texture of the sub-bass. The Planar demonstrated that the rumble is not linear, that is, the rumble is not just one constant brrrr. Instead, The planar showed the rumble effect oscillates slightly, giving the impression that the sound is hitting four walls and bouncing back. But because the transients is so darn fast, that effect does not distort. It's simply a very different sound than what I typically hear with this track using other headphones. When the crescendo hits at the middle of the song, the organ cut right through the mix without becoming harsh. The other instruments were audible, though somewhat melded. When the sub-bass rumble came back into the mix with force, it remained separate and did not overwhelm the other instruments. Around 2 minutes and 30 seconds into the song, there are numerous elements in the mix. The planar made it appear as though there were indeed many instruments. Although some melded, I never got the impression that the instruments were simply a jumble of stuff. Then, at 3 minutes and 10 seconds into the song, when the vocalists chime in, they sounded clear and slowly rose through the mix. Their voices were natural and neutral. In Conquer by Overwork, the planar recreated all bass instruments without melding them. The mid-bass had accurate, hard impact. The sub-bass was toned down, not overbearing. The synth sounded accurate, neutral, without becoming harsh. I could hear the different drum strikes in one ear cup or the other, one after the other, with very fast transients. There was excellent separation of instruments and accurate detail of each type of instrument. Nothing sounded muffled or distant. Small details like the effect of sparks around 3 minutes into the song were incredibly clear and quite refreshing to hear. The sound of rolling marbles from 10 seconds into the song was also accurate. I next listened to several hip-hop songs including Pure Water, Uproar, New Patek, and Reel It In. Again, the planar recreated these songs with natural, accurate, fast bass. In Pure Water, the sub-bass was fast, lingering only a short time. It was not elevated and the mid-bass was louder. The sub-bass rumble sounded like the subwoofer was in the corner of the room, adding emphasis where needed, but not interfering with the mix. Vocals were crystal clear and easily 2 steps ahead of the other instruments. The requisite sparkle was there without harshness. I had a similar experience with the other hip-hop tracks I mentioned. In all these songs, the sub-bass was fast, controlled, and not emphasized. Mid-bass was louder, had tight, fast response, and did not meld with the sub-bass. Vocals in all these songs stood out 2 steps ahead of the mix. Planar magnetic drivers have the lauded fast transients. The Avantone planar brings that to the playing field, fully kitted out and ready to smash some teeth in. The clarity, detail, and resolution in the bass is excellent. There is no doubt that the bass reproduction with the planar red is much more accurate and neutral, not to mention significantly more detailed and resolving than either on the LCD-1 or the NDH-20. Mids on this headphone are neutral, precise, and smooth, and accurate above all else. In Orla Gartland's Why Am I Like This, Orla has natural grain and sibilance mixed into the song. Many headphones either accentuate the sibilance or cut it off entirely. Some enhance the grain to unbearable degrees. The planar treated her voice with respect. I could hear the grain, but it was not emphasized. I heard the sibilance, but it was not harsh, not accentuated, and was not rolled off. The drums had fast decay. The guitar sounded natural and had accurate timbre. The instruments did not meld. When the backup vocalist chimes in at 2 minutes and 40 seconds into the song, she was crystal clear and sounded to the side of the right ear cup. The vocalists were about 1 to 2 steps ahead of the mix. In Want You Back by Haim, the planar again recreated the primary vocalist's natural sibilance without emphasizing it. The piano, guitar, and drums all had natural timbre and tended not to meld. The echo, which occurs at 11 seconds into the song, sounded exactly like an echo, something that many headphones struggle to recreate. The backup vocalists were crystal clear, both showing their individual tonalities. When all the instruments played at peak volume, the backup vocalists melded slightly, though when I paid close attention, I could hear their separate tonalities. In Superposition by Young the Giant, the planar accurately recreated the guitar and ukulele. The drums had natural timbre and all the instruments were distinct from each other. The primary vocalist sounded smooth and his sibilance was not pushed forward or rolled off. The bass guitar was audible in the background, as it should be, and did not interfere with the rest of the mix. There is a backup vocalist in this song who could be heard upon close inspection. This backup vocalist did not jump out as he does on the Austrian Audio Hi-X55, but he was audible on the Avantone Planar. In Firefall by Bear, the Planar did display the primary and backup vocalist without trouble. The backup vocalist at times was just a little slower, and his tonality was slightly higher pitched. The guitar and drums sounded clear and separate with natural timbre. The vocals were 2 steps ahead of the mix and neutral without a hint of harshness. Overall, the clarity, resolution, and naturalness of the mids is quite surprising. It is rare that I hear headphones that are actually neutral. Neutral does not mean you hear details, but instead natural tonality as it was recorded. In this regard, the Planar seems to excel. The Planar's treble response is remarkably clear, well extended, accurate, natural, and clean. And it is damn neutral. In Scherzo for X-Wings, the horns and brass came through perfectly with their natural timbre and energy. Some headphones accentuate or de-emphasize the horns and brass, but the Planar kept them exact. There was excellent separation of each instrument group set, and group sets appeared in different parts of the ear cups. There was good instrument placement, where some instruments sounded further to the left in the left ear cup, and some instruments seemed further back from the others. The brass instruments had this grainy sound that is totally natural. It was audible but not overemphasized. There was no harshness or peakiness. In Five from the City by Johan Johansson, the Planar recreated the piano as if it was about 10 feet from me. Its bassier notes did not interact with the others, and transience of all notes was quick. I could hear the electric buzz effect in the right ear cup, the creaking of wood on the pianist's bench, and the slight shifting of weight from the cello. Speaking of the cello, it was smooth as silk and separate from the piano. Its tonality was neutral and clean. In Take 5 by the Dave Brubeck Quartet, the drums appeared in the left ear cup, the piano in the right, the saxophone dead center, and the bass behind everything else. The saxophone was smooth, its tonality and timbre natural. The instruments did not meld and remained distinct even when they played at maximum. The bass was not emphasized, and its sound sneaked through the mix. Overall, the treble response is one of the most natural and neutral I have ever heard. The separation of different instruments is downright accurate. Details of instruments is not forced into your head, and neither are details shrouded or veiled. The treble extension is quite good. I will point out that the drivers present sound up to 30 kHz, which is significantly less than a lot of audiophile headphones. Yet, the Planar has no distortion, no peakiness, no jarring transitions. This is a testament that the high-res certification is arbitrary, bogus nonsense jazz hands to distract people. High-res certification means that a device can present frequencies to at least 40,000 kHz. If that occurs, your device gets a nifty high-res sticker, and new audiophiles jump up and down in demonic craze. Well, all I can say is that the Avantone Planar does not need the sticker. Throughout this test, I have tried to provide information about detail. I have explained where I hear certain sounds and how they interact with the rest of the songs. I do not want to rehash what I already said. However, it is worth pointing out that the Planar recreates details naturally. I'll give you 2 examples of unnatural detail. In the first instance, you have the Austrian Audio Hi-X55. This is one of the most detailed headphones on the market. Under $1,000, I think you will be hard-pressed to find an alternative that does what the X55 does. Details attack your ears from all corners of the recording, and this can be uncomfortable for some people. It is certainly not natural. We do not naturally hear the amount of details that the X55 actually provides. In the second instance, you have the audeze Mobius and the LCD-1. The Mobius is the worst headphone on the market, bar none. It has no ability to provide natural tonality or detail. It fails in every respect. The LCD-1 is far superior to the Mobius in nearly every way. But the LCD-1 hides details because of its smooth tonality. It steamrolls over the most obvious details recorded in a track. Though pleasant to the average person, this tonality is not accurate. The Avantone Planar does recreate details in songs, but does not shove them into your ears like the X55. Nor does the Planar hide details like the Mobius and the LCD1, and to be frank, like many other headphones. But I cannot say that the Avantone Planar has average detail, since I think the presentation of detail is quite unique. Minor perturbations of some instruments, the gravelly nature of brass and horns, the plucking of guitar strings, all of it sounds so natural and true that it is not the typical style. For a good example, I suggest listening to songs by Guy Clark. He uses an acoustic guitar in all of his music, and he strums that guitar with varying rhythm. On the Planar, you can hear when he strums hard and when he strums carefully. The tonality of the way that these strings are plucked is quite different. The tonalities of different guitars in his song El Coyote is also quite obvious. Out of all the headphones I have ever used, the Planar ranks among the best in presenting natural and neutral detail. As for a more quantitative test, I use the song New Light by Kazuki. This song has layers of details, including the sound of children playing in the background, wind, the rustling of tall grass, synth, guitar, piano, and footsteps. I count the number of footsteps I can hear within the first 60 seconds. The king of detail retrieval in this test is the Focal Clear, which presents 16 footsteps in the first 45 seconds. The next best is the X55, which presents 14 to 15 footsteps in the first 60 seconds. The Avantone Planar revealed 8 to 9 footsteps. This was more than the LCD1 and the NDH20, but less than the hifi Man Sundara. This was consistent with what I have been hearing on this headphone. The Planar does not sacrifice tonality and neutrality for greater detail, but the detail you hear is precise and, dare I say it, analog and not forced. The Planar is an open back headphone. Generally, you expect open back to have wider soundstage than closed back. The X55 tore apart that idea. However, the Planar is perfectly in step with many other open back headphones. It has above average to wide soundstage, depending on your recording. It has slightly greater soundstage than the hifi Man Sundara, and probably about as much as the hifi Man Diva. It has noticeably less than the HD800S. It should be no surprise that the Planar leaves the LCD1 and the NDH20 in the dust. If you have not yet gathered from this review, I'll make it plain and simple. The Avantone Planar is neutral and fantastically, pleasantly, naturally neutral at that. Many companies boast their headphones are neutral, but they frankly lie. I keep pointing to Audeze, but they are a big offender of false promises and racketeering practices. They have repeatedly promised neutral sound from their headphones, and they have never delivered. The Allo Audio S4 and S4R have neutral sound signature. For dynamic driver headphones, these are the most neutral I have heard so far. As planar magnetic headphones go, I never found one remotely close to the neutral sound signature I hear on the Allos. Consequently, when I read Avantone marketing the Planar as neutral and flat, I simply was not impressed. But now I am. I have no hesitation concluding that the Planar is neutral, and in my opinion, probably more so than even the Allo S4 and the S4R. There are a few differences between the Allo and Planar, other than the drivers. First, the Planar Red has much faster bass transients. Second, it has much wider soundstage. Third, it has more neutral vocals, whereas the Allo headphones exhibit just a hint of accentuated sibilance. Fourth, the Planar presents an overall cleaner sound with greater separation of instruments. Finally, the Planar is simply more comfortable, which has a lot of subjective influence on how you perceive the sound. Neutral does not have to mean flat, boring, or uninspiring. The Avantone Planar shows what neutral actually is, true to the original recording, or at least close to it. And frankly, the Planar is probably the closest to that mark at this point. There is no mincing words. The Planar Red is a great headphone. Only time will tell if they are sturdy. As much as I appreciate American-made products, I am wary of American-made hype. So I really don't want to hype the Planar. But I simply cannot find anything offensive about it. There's nothing, absolutely nothing, that jumps out and tells me that the songs are not being presented naturally. Smooth, neutral, resolving, naturally detailed, that is how I would describe the sound signature of these headphones. This headphone is probably not for those who want excitement. If you like a V-shaped sound with big bad bass, then you're looking at the wrong headphone. If you like dark-sounding, intimate vocals, again, the Avantone Planar is not that type of headphone. But V-shaped and dark-sounding headphones can be tiring. If you have given the Bose, Beats, AKG, Audio-Technica Winnebagos for a drive, it's probably worth trying something that is actually neutral. For anyone who drools over Audeze headphones believing they will provide neutral, accurate sound, you should probably put the brakes on your runaway hype-mobile. There are good alternatives, most cheaper than what Audeze offers. So, when I look at the Avantone Planar, I am flat out impressed with its technical abilities as a neutral, natural headphone. This brings me to value. Planar magnetic headphones are very expensive as a general rule. You can opt for the hi-fi man stuff, but their shaky build quality and sound signature might not be to your liking. You could buy the LCD one and be very happy with its particular sound signature. Or you could try one of the Chinese planars like the Monolith M1070 or 1570 or the Sennheiser Ava or any of the many Sennheiser Ava clones. But again, you are going to hear the specific sound character of those headphones. The Avantone Planar has a sound signature, as I mentioned several times, but it is the type of sound signature that simply suits all types of genres. Maybe you want more of one thing or another, in which case your sound preferences simply may not coincide with the Avantone Planar's neutral tonality. But if you are looking for a headphone with the Avantone Planar's very neutral sound, then yes, this is good value. I know $400 is a lot of money, but the LCD one costs the same amount, comes with a laughable plastic build, and is the opposite of neutral. The NDH20 is $500, has build to literally kill someone, and is also not neutral. But the Planar Red's $400 price tag brings better build than the LCD one and more accurate, neutral sound than any headphone near this price range. In my opinion, the $400 price tag is not at all offensive. And just like the sound signature, it is perfectly in tune with the headphone. We will continue to test the Planar Red to other headphones, including the Audeze and Monolith options. Stay tuned for that.